Professor Garton, hi. Thanks for your time, for your support of Ukraine. I have two very brief questions. What is the future of Ukraine regarding the past, all the problems, all our so complicated past of Ukrainian state, two wars, full-scale invasion? I actually don't like this concept because full-scale invasion started 10 years ago. However, what is the future of the country and the future cooperation with the West?
It obviously depends on the war, and that's why the first thing is to enable Ukraine to win this war. And I don't think there's sufficient clarity in the West on that point. But let's assume it is won. Then I think 2022 was the turning point, not in Ukraine's recognition that Ukraine belongs to Europe and the West, but in the West and the rest of Europe's recognition
Reassessment
that Ukraine belongs in Europe and in the West. But then I think one has to be clear that even in the best case, this is a matter of quite a few years before you have the full integration of Ukraine into Europe and the West. I mean, remember that in the case of Poland and the Czech Republic and Hungary, which everyone holds up as a model for how, it still took 15 years. So I think one should have no illusion. And actually, I also think it's important to say it wouldn't necessarily be good for Europe, but it also wouldn't necessarily be good for Ukraine if it was just done fast-tracked overnight. Because being a member of the EU, I'm talking mainly about the EU here, is very demanding and can put great stresses on the economy. But I think future historians will record this as an absolute turning point, and I'm sure that ultimately the future of Ukraine is in the West.
Could be this situation the turning point for the post-Soviet countries also? How you see the future of the former Soviet Empire? Because Armenia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, all these countries, they have different vision of the post-Soviet space. And I feel that a lot of them try to balance now, which is complicated actually to do. I know it's complicated to analyze because Kazakhstan has their own vision between China and Russia, Armenia, Azerbaijan between Turkey and Russia. So what is the future of post-Soviet space, do you see?
Let's call it what it is. An empire in decline.
Exactly.
A former empire.
Yeah.
And when we recognize that, then we know from history that these processes take a long time, are very difficult, and are often violent, as we're now seeing. So that's a really important thing to recognize, that this is going to be a long struggle with complicated processes there. I did an event at the Munich Security Conference with, including the president of Georgia. She was absolutely clear about the orientation. But of course, in Georgian politics, you also have this other tendency to try and make a deal with Russia. I think, therefore, a lot depends on whether Europe in particular has the real political will to continue the eastward enlargement. Because if you don't have sufficient political will coming from the West, from Europe, then what the Germans call Schaukelpolitik, a policy of playing both sides, becomes rational. So that for Armenia, for Georgia, as for President Vučić in Serbia. So it's really striking this. Vučić is a fine example of playing all sides. And it's important to say that in this world that we're discovering, where you have multiple great and middle powers, no longer just the West and the East. You have China, you have India, you have Turkey, you have Russia, you have South Africa, you have Saudi Arabia. There are multiple possibilities for playing multiple sides. If you're a Central Asian country, you can do Russia, you can do the West, you can do Turkey,
China.
you can do China. So I think a lot depends on the strategic vision of Europe.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Great.